It's the beginning of February, and we've got some great news for you about upcoming Warhammer 40K releases, an expansion to one of last year's best brand new board games, a little nugget of Omaha history, and a huge announcement about an upcoming in-store event for you on this episode of Geek Room Update. I'm Jason, and I'm the owner here at the Geek Room Hobbies and Games. I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in to our second episode of Geek Room Update. I would also like to thank everyone who tuned in to our first episode, as well as our over a dozen subscribers. All kidding aside, I do appreciate everybody that took the time to watch last time. I think this is a great way for us to let folks know about what's going on in the store, as well as allow me to share some news and tidbits from the broader gaming community that I think folks might enjoy. In fact, we've got a story coming up at the end of the show in honor of Black History Month that I think you will all want to check out. Now, last time we did run a little bit longer than I would have liked, so we're going to try and keep things moving at a brisker pace, so let's get things started. Starting things off with war games, last Friday, GW released the latest expansion to its popular Warhammer 40K Kill Team skirmish game. The new expansion, Arena, is the third expansion for Kill Team following Rogue Trader and Commanders. Now, much like Rogue Trader, this expansion focuses on ultra-close quarters combat, which means instead of playing in the wide open spaces of regular Kill Team, you're playing in the cramped interiors of buildings and starships. There are also rules changes to reflect the new style of play, such as being able to target a charging enemy as soon as you have line of sight on them. Arena games are also played on a smaller game board, measuring only 30 inches by 22 inches to heighten the sense of close quarters combat. It will also speed up the play of the already brief Kill Team game. The reason for speeding up the gameplay is Arena's other focus, which is competitive tournament play. In the Arena box set, you'll get a 64-page rule book that lays out the new close quarters combat rules, as well as a full set of tournament rules, right down to painting requirements for miniatures and player behavior. This might be one of GW's most competition-focused retail products I've ever seen them release. If this seems like the kind of thing you're into, Kill Team Arena is already available in stores, and you're going to want to stick around to the end of the episode for a very special announcement coming up regarding Kill Team a little later on. Now, next Friday, on February 9th, GW has another big release, and that is the refresh of the Genestealer Cults army for Warhammer 40K. Now, obviously, the Genestealer Cults Codex was one of the few remaining major factions waiting to be released, and next week you'll also get the data cards and the dice. But the real treasure coming out are the new miniatures. Now, in my opinion, these are perhaps the single best-looking army that has ever been released for 40K. Some of the individual models that are coming out next week, like the Magus and the Locust, look just absolutely phenomenal. As well as the Atalan Jackal motorcycles, those look absolutely amazing. And there's more coming the week afterwards, including the Ridge Runner model, which is perhaps one of the best models I've ever seen GW produce. Again, all of the Genestealer Cult stuff will start coming out next Friday on February 9th, so be sure and pre-order if that's something that you want to reserve a copy of. Now, at this point, you're probably saying to yourself, hey, we're only an episode and a half in, and he does an awful lot of talking about Warhammer. And you're right, that's true, we do. Part of that is because they have an aggressive release schedule and stuff's coming out all the time. And the other reason is because it's just an extremely popular IP. There's Warhammer stuff all over everywhere. I mention that because we're about to move on to this week's new role-playing game, which, believe it or not, is Warhammer 40K Wrath and Glory. That's right, Wrath and Glory is the new role-playing game set in the Warhammer 40K universe. This time it's published by Ulysses Spiel, who takes over from Fantasy Flight Games, who previously had the license. Now, there are some key differences between Wrath and Glory and some of the other role-playing games that have been in the Warhammer 40K universe before. One of these is that there's an expanded amount of archetypes. In previous games, you were usually limited to playing a character that was related to the theme of the game. So, for example, you would be playing as Rogue Traders, Space Marines, members of Death Watch, and that was it. Now, Wrath and Glory is different in that it's got a much more open archetype system. Not only are all of those playable classes, but you can also play things like Rogue Psychers, Hive Gangers, Imperial Guardsmen, Sisters of Silence, and even Eldar Warlocks and Orc Boys, because what would a role-playing game be without elves and orcs? Currently, the core rulebook, the GM screen, battle maps, and the first published adventure path, Dark Tides, are available in stores. Turning now to board games, we wanted to focus this time on an expansion to one of last year's most popular brand new board games, and that is Root. Root, the Riverfolk expansion, is the first expansion for Root, and it adds a lot to the game, including 2 new factions, the Lizard Cult and the Riverfolk Company, which takes the total number of players that can play Root up to 6. There is also a NPC bot mechanic that has been added that you can play against a new bot faction either cooperatively or competitively with other players. The addition of the bot faction also makes it so that Root can now be played as a single-player game. If you are a fan of Root, I highly suggest that you check this one out. Now, this week's CCG news isn't a new release, but in fact something we mentioned last time, and that is that we received our latest restock of Keyforge. Now, if you're not familiar with Keyforge, Keyforge is a new customizable card game from Fantasy Flight Games that was designed by Richard Garfield, the guy who started the whole CCG craze back in 1993 when he created Magic the Gathering. The 2 games are similar, but Keyforge has one very unique difference. And I literally mean unique, because every single deck manufactured for Keyforge is different. There are no 2 decks that are the same. Each Archon deck is made of 36 cards. That is 12 each from one of 3 factions out of the 7 that are included in Keyforge. Each of those includes a mixture of creatures, artifacts, and abilities that you can use when playing opponents. Keyforge is a lot like a sealed deck tournament in that you only play with one whole complete deck, and as I said, each deck is unique. Now, Keyforge has been a little hard to come by since it was released before Christmas. The reason for this is because the publisher thought they had produced enough copies to get them all the way through the end of the year, and in fact they were completely sold out on release day. Since then, we are still waiting for restocks of the starter set, but have managed to get some of the Archon decks in. The starter set is nice, but you don't really need it because there are rules that are freely available online. There will be a link in the description below to the Keyforge rules. All you really need to play is just one deck, or a couple if you'd like a choice, depending on what your opponent has, and they're only $10 a pop. Because of the popularity of Keyforge and the currently limited supply, we are unfortunately restricting everybody to just 2 decks per person per day. So if you want to get into Keyforge, or if you want to expand your decks, now is the time to come down and grab a couple for yourself. Now, moving on to in-store events, I did want to remind you about some of the demos that we had talked about last time. While most of them will have already been completed by the time this airs, there is one still out there, and that is Rescue Polar Bears, which you can try out on February 16th between 2 and 8 p.m. here at the store. Now, in our next episode, hopefully we'll have an update for you on some more in-store demos for board games coming up later on in February and on into March. Now, I wanted to put in another plug for our D&D Adventurers League game. There are still seats available, and that game meets every Wednesday night from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Last week, because of the Arctic temperatures outside, we actually canceled the game. So if you do want to join, now is the perfect time. You haven't really missed all of that much. We are also still looking for people who would like to DM our alternate night game, probably either Tuesdays or Thursdays, and someone who would be interested in DMing our game for kids ages 10 to 15 that we're going to be having on the weekends. If you'd like more information about DMing either of those games, or if you would like to volunteer, just stop into the store anytime during our normal business hours and speak to either myself or Melissa, and we'd be glad to give you all of the information. Now that we've got some of the housekeeping for in-store events out of the way, I wanted to tell you about something that is really huge. It's a big announcement. It's something I'm actually very excited about because it's something we have been working towards since we opened last September. And that is, it's time for our very first ever competitive in-store tournament. That's right. On Saturday, February 23rd, 2019, starting at noon, we will be having our first ever full-on competitive tournament. And it's going to be a tournament for Kill Team Arena. The tournament is going to be limited to 32 players, and there will be a small $5 entry fee. But as part of the entry fee for competing, you will get some unique tactics cards and some unique objective markers. There will also be an award for the best painted army as voted on by the other competitors, and medals for the top 3 finishers. Now, we will be posting the rules for the tournament on our website a little bit later this week, but if you have already purchased the Kill Team Arena box set or are planning to, then know that those rules are the rules we will be using for our tournament. Now, pre-registrations for the tournament will open up Monday, February 4th at noon when the store opens. You don't have to pre-register, and you certainly don't have to prepay, but anybody who does come in ahead of time to pre-register will be the first people seated for the tournament on the off chance there's more than 32 people who show up that day. So if you are interested and if you think you've got what it takes to win it all, stop in soon and pre-register for the tournament. And again, we will post more information as we get a little bit closer to tournament time on our website. And as always, you can find out more information about the tournament as well as all of our in-store events by using the free Game4 app available for Android and iOS devices. There is a link to Game4 in the description below. One last thing before we go. As you know, February is Black History Month, and I wanted to take a time to try and highlight contributions by the African American community to the world of tabletop gaming. Now, much to my surprise, when I started researching this idea, there wasn't a whole lot of information out there about contributions by Black individuals to gaming. That was until I found an article from the Omaha World Herald, detailing what I think is not only a great piece of gaming history, but a great piece of local history and African American history.
In 1978, three Omaha African-American men, Bob Samuels, a director for Henningsen, Durham & Richardson, Inc., the engineering firm now known as HDR, Rudy Smith, a photographer for the Omaha World Herald, and Charles Bryant, a former Husker lineman, who was at the time the assistant principal for Bryan High School, designed and published a board game called Discover Omaha, intended to teach people about our city. The game was a simple dice-rolling board game with mechanics very similar to Monopoly. The game was self-financed by the men who invested $12,000 to manufacture and publish it. It was available locally in stores such as Richmond Gordman's, Mangelson's, JCPenney, Yonkers, and Brandeis. The game was designed by the three to bring attention to the then-planned revitalization of downtown Omaha, which was hoped would help the mostly African-American near north side of the city. Smith was concerned about the, quote, black brain drain of young African-American men leaving the city and hoped the game would shine a spotlight on what a fantastic city Omaha actually could be. The game board featured many iconic Omaha locations such as Epley Airfield, the Orpheum Theater, Boys Town, Joslyn Art Museum, and the Henry Dorley Zoo that are still around today, as well as many beloved landmarks such as Peeney Park, the Civic Auditorium, the Stockyards, Exarban, and Rosenblatt Stadium, that unfortunately no longer are. It should also be noted that one of the game's three designers, Charles Bryant, deserves his own special recognition during Black History Month. The University of Nebraska had banned black athletes for competing between 1917 and the 1940s, but in 1952, Charles Bryant became the first black player for the Nebraska Cornhusker football team in the school's modern era. And then, in 1953, he became the first African-American to letter in any sport at UNL since the 1910s. During his time at Nebraska, he faced many hardships and a lot of racial resentment, including having to sleep at the Black YMCA when the team traveled to Oklahoma, and being asked not to use the front entrance or swimming pool of the team's hotel when they traveled to Miami. He was also selected an All-Big Seven guard in 1954. After college, Charlie went into a career in education and coaching, and in 1962 became the first black varsity head coach in the Omaha and Council Bluffs area when he took over the wrestling program at Thomas Jefferson High School in Council Bluffs. In 1987, Charles Bryant was inducted into the Nebraska Football Hall of Fame. In 2015, the Omaha World Herald named Charles Bryant to the 100 greatest Husker athletes of all time for both football and wrestling. Charles Bryant passed away in 2004 at the age of 71.
On a personal note, while Discover Omaha wasn't a big game and was only published locally, its connection to Omaha history and African American history I find very fascinating. If anybody watching this video happens to have a copy of Discover Omaha lying around in an attic or a basement somewhere, I certainly would love to see it. I would love for you to bring it up to the store or give us a call and let us know that you've got it. I'd also like to thank the Omaha World Herald, whose great reporting on both Discover Omaha and Charles Bryant contributed to this story. There's a link in the description below to the articles that this piece was based off of. Well, that does it for this edition of Geek Room Update. Remember, we're posting new episodes every other Sunday night, so you'll have them bright and early Monday morning. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to like and subscribe. Also, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. The handle is @GeekRoomGames for all three. You can also visit our website at www.geekroomgames.com. Thank you for watching, everyone, and happy gaming.